I'd like to read a passage that they have chosen, and I'm actually going to speak from that. It's a passage written by Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man of the Bible. He was the richest man. He had the most wives. He had everything it would appear to give him a life of contentment, and that actually he would love life. But instead, he writes this passage that, at least when I was young, a group called the Byrds put it into a song. And it's from Ecclesiastes 3. If you don't remember the Byrds, that means you're old like me.
I'm old.
But it's a very important passage, and it really speaks a lot to today. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to dance. A time to mourn, and a time to laugh. Sometimes it's really hard right now to ever think that there would be a time to laugh or a time to dance, right? A time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, a time to cast away, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. Time for love, a time for hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. What gain does a man have from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to man to be busy with. God has made everything beautiful in its time, but he has also put eternity into the heart of man so that man cannot figure out exactly what is happening at any specific time. I perceive that there is nothing better than for man to be joyful, to do good as long as they live. I perceive also that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added, nothing taken from it, and God has done this so man would seek after him. So I saw that there is nothing better that a man should rejoice in his work, for then he will appear before God and answer to him. As I was reading through those, what we call couplets, did you notice that they were exact opposites? They were exact opposites. The time to mourn, a time to dance, and it begins with a time to be born and a time to die. I've been at our church about 30 years, and any given Sunday, as you look out, you see people that have had somebody who passed away. There's the lady who got the phone call from the doctors that she's got to go through chemo treatments. There's the person over there who just found out they're pregnant. There's the person over there that just came back from the funeral of their aunt. The Sunday before, none of those things had happened. A week before this, none of these things have happened. The question becomes, if life can change so quickly and seem so unpredictable, and how in the world are we going to navigate this thing called life? A guy named Solomon had money, he had smarts, he had friends, he had success, but none of those things could give him the control of even a single minute and time of his life. In fact, if you read the rest of the book of Ecclesiastes, he talks about trying all those things. And he ends up saying, and I hated life And he said, and I tried to be wise, but I actually began to lose my wisdom because I went after the things just to forget it all. But he writes this as an instruction. And he says this: God knows your life and my life, every twist and turn that it will take. You and I, as we live life, we live it in those time segments a little bit at a time, not knowing which the next time segment will bring. And he says this: God has made everything beautiful in its time. I just held my granddaughter yesterday upstate. This is our third grandchild, and it's great to have that baby. But if that baby never grew up, it would no longer be a beautiful thing. It would be something that the doctors were concerned about. But we're already like, oh no, she's 3 months old, we got to keep her small, right? 8 months, you're like, oh, where's my little baby? A guy or a woman who's unmarried and is dating, what a beautiful thing to be out there and seeing everybody. But then somebody gets married, you know what? They're now married. The season has changed. It's time to stop looking around. So it says here that God has made everything beautiful in its time. And what Solomon is saying to us is, my life can seem random, but it's God, because he is eternal, who actually sees it all from beginning to end. We're not going to make sense of this life by sitting down and just thinking harder. We're not going to make sense of it by going back and picking up all the pieces and trying to figure out what happened. You will drive yourself crazy with that and become even more sorrowful and more frustrated and angry. There are times when we say the eternal God has a perspective that I don't have. And by the way, God can handle us being angry at him, just don't stop talking to him. If you read the Psalms, many of them are people crying out to God with their frustration. It's when you become silent towards God, because God is never silent. He says something very important in here, and I know that you guys are sitting in the sun, so I'll keep this short. But he says this: and he did this so man would seek after him. When I realize how quickly life can change, and even how quickly life can end, I also realize how important it is to live it for something than just the here and now. They never, and you've probably heard this before, but they never have a U-Haul that follows a hearse. Because if you spend your life just collecting things, how sad that is. But if you spend your life investing it in your family, getting to know God, it says God does these things so that we will seek after him. When I realize how out of control life can be, when I realize how meaningless it seemingly can be, I turn to someone who actually gives it meaning.
Amen.
And I turn to someone who can actually help me invest in the things that are really going to matter and not in the tchotchke. So, as he comes to the end of this, he says, and one day we all will stand before God. Today is a time to mourn, but there will come a time to laugh. It's hard to think about that, but I want to say this. Remember to look to God, because God has a perspective that you and I will never have. I want to give you an illustration. If an ant were crawling across the floor here, an ant's a small, little bitty insect that can only see millimeters ahead of himself. And as he crawls across, you and I can see that there's like Clorox sitting there. And as the ant crawls, he's going to crawl into that, and you know what's going to happen. So you kindly pick him up and put him across, and he says, thank you for... No, he says, what? You big meanie. You big meanie. You interrupted my life. I was doing just fine. But you, because you have a different perspective, could see something that he did not realize. God is eternal. We're not going to grasp all the things that have happened. We're not going to grasp. We're not going to make sense of them. But what we can grasp is that the person who is up there, his name is God. He sent Jesus into this life so that he actually could experience what it was like to be one of us. And he says, I'm the one who in time can turn those things around. Those things that are unpredictable, I know they're coming, and I'm the one that you can turn to because I will give you the wisdom and the strength to make it through those changes. How many of you this past year had something happen that you had no idea was coming? Exactly. God knows it. And I counsel you, turn to him. Even if you're turning to him in a time of frustration and crying out. Read the Psalms. Read the psalm that says he cries out to God. Cry out to God. He's not silent. I'm going to ask you, there's a song sheet you have. If you know this, please sing it with me. We're going to sing a few of these verses. And if not, it's okay too. Let's sing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Verse 4. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first